Israel sees Hamas, like most of the international community, as a terrorist organization. Not only under Israeli law is Hamas classified as a terrorist organization, but under European law, EU, British law, Canadian law, American law, Japanese law, Australian law. In fact, Hamas, I think there's an international consensus that it is indeed a terrorist organization. From Israeli perspective, it's not just a theoretical classification. I mean, we've had too many Israelis killed in very deadly Hamas terror attacks against civilian population. And it must be clear, and Hamas still says this today, every Israeli civilian, man, woman and child, is a legitimate target in their eyes. When Hamas first came into the front bench, so to speak, the then UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, put 3 benchmarks on the table for the international community to deal with Hamas. They must recognize my country's right to exist. They must renounce violence against civilians, terrorism, and they must come on board with the peace process. And those 3 benchmarks have been put on the table. If Hamas was to accept those benchmarks, then it's a different organization, and the door is open both for talks with Israel and talks with the international community. If only we could achieve a peace treaty with the Palestinians, that we could see the creation of a Palestinian state that recognizes the legitimacy of the Jewish state and is willing to live in peace with us. If only that were possible. But I think a lot of people in the international community fail to understand that if Israel just pulls out without guarantees for its security, then that would be an irresponsible act by the Israeli government. And the best example is Gaza. Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip. We took down all the settlements. We pulled back to what was the recognized international frontier. What did we receive in return? Peace? The opposite is true. Hamas took power in Gaza, and we've had thousands of rockets from Gaza fired on innocent Israeli civilians from Gaza. Territory that we evacuated became territory from which we were attacked from. So we're ready for peace, but it has to be real peace. The idea of just giving up territory to see Israel attacked from that territory is not an option. Pulling out of the West Bank, not in the framework where you can guarantee Israel's security, would endanger Israel's security and the safety of Israeli civilians. I'd ask you the following question. If you had in the West Bank the sort of government you have today in Gaza, you'd have missiles on all of Israel. And I don't think any rational government in Israel can take a policy move that would allow that to happen. We're ready for peace. We're ready for reconciliation. We're ready for 2 states for 2 peoples. We're ready for a peaceful state of Palestine that lives side by side with Israel, that recognizes the legitimacy of the Jewish state. But just to pull out and hope for the best, that's not an option.